Good evening, guys. I hope you guys have had a great week. It's been a week full of innovation and technology consultations. I think this week there were also United Nations technology consultations from across the continent, but I think the event was happening here in Nairobi. And there's so much that's going on in trying to drive the technology agenda and innovation and generally science around the globe. And one of the things I think I was part of was consultations from Africa on a global digital compact and what that's meant to look like for the African continent and the rest of the world. So, what are some of those challenges that Africa is facing regarding internet connection and just emerging technologies and artificial intelligence and how that plugs into the whole digital compact by the United Nations? And then there's also been the Innovation Week that has been going on. And I think a lot of conversations around the circular economy as well that have been ongoing in Rwanda. So much has been happening this week. And I think it's only fair that we have conversations around science, innovation, and collaboration. And who better to talk to than Leonard Kariko, who is the managing director at Dow Chemical East Africa. Leonard, it's so good to have you on this space. And before I can even let you speak, I just wanted to highlight a bit of what Mwango Capital is all about. For those of you who are joining the space for the first time, Mwango Capital have been here for some time, but I guess the last 1 year is where we can say we've seen Mwango Capital everywhere. I love the memes the most. I don't know who does the memes at Mwango Capital, but yes, I'm a big fan of those memes. And Mwango Capital are a research and media company. They cover East Africa's financial market and seek to inform investors about what the companies do and help them to digest through research as well as company financials and business news. And these spaces, the Mwango spaces, are a brainchild of Mwango Capital, as you might know, and they happen mostly on Fridays, but also Wednesdays and other days of the week, especially when planned. And if you haven't followed them already, that is something that you should have done by now. And so, yes, back to our conversation. Leonard, it's so good to have you on our space this evening. I know Fridays can get crazy, especially in December. So it's so good to have you.
No, thank you, Joy. Happy to be here. And good evening to everyone on the spaces. Happy to be here.
So to everyone else, we will have a conversation, and then much later we will open up the mics and allow you to ask questions around our areas of conversation. But in the meantime, you can take advantage of the comments section under the Mwango Capital handle. So, Leonard, if we might get this started, probably tell us a bit about yourself besides your first and last name, and also a bit about Dow Chemical East Africa for our audiences to get a hang of what exactly the company is about, but more importantly, also about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Joy. My name's, as you said, Leonard Kareko. I'll tell you something interesting about myself, that I was a very good chemistry student in high school. And I became a chemical engineer. And I happened to work for one of the big chemical, if not the largest, integrated chemical company in the world, which is Dow Chemical. And we are happy to have an office here in Nairobi. A little bit about myself. As I said, chemical engineer, a father of 2 little kids, a boy and a girl. How I spend my time, I enjoy trail running. I do long runs. And when I'm not running, I enjoy reading. And most importantly, I also enjoy nature. So I do a lot of drives and I enjoy the mountains. So that's a little bit about me. From a professional perspective, chemical engineer, both a bachelor's and a master's. And then I have an MBA. And my journey has been such that you always start being very technical. But as you move on in your career, you move on to sales. So today, I'm a chemical engineer, but truly focused in creating in sales and creating value for our customers by introducing innovations to them. In terms of the region that we cover East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia are the main markets for us. Now, if I also tell you a little bit about Dow, Dow came to Kenya in 2010. We established an office in 2010. Dow, as I said, is a company that's been known to be quite innovative, and it's a B2B business. So that's why you'll never see any of our products on the shelf. But for those who are in manufacturing, it's a brand that's well known and quite reputable. We established the office in 2010 and then also opened an office in Ethiopia in 2015. So in East Africa, we are represented in Kenya and Ethiopia.
Okay. And I'm seeing that you operate in about 104 manufacturing sites in 31 countries. That's huge. Yes. I was reading somewhere that you delivered sales of approximately $55 billion in 2021. $1 billion, Leonard?
Yeah, to be honest, Joy, even for us, it's a bit difficult to really have an understanding or a grasp of these numbers. But yeah, you're right. In 2021, our net sales were 55 billion. We are 35,700 employees. And we're in 31 countries in which Dow has manufacturing sites. So truly a global presence. So it's quite a huge organization. And what makes it even more special is that this year we celebrated 125 years since the company was formed.
All right. 35,700 people. That's a lot. We're going through a whole phase of right sizing and downsizing in different sectors. I don't know how you're keeping up with those numbers and making sure that people are maintained within the workspace.
It's a good question you ask. Today, we are quite in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and truly ambiguous environment. And just like any other organization, we're in the job in making sure that we are right-sized. And luckily, we have been in East Africa and even pretty much in the region because we are one of the youngest regions for the organization. I think what's interesting and really what has kept us afloat is that the solutions we provide are basically consumed at the household level. So we are heavily linked with what you consume day in, day out. And therefore, our business is not foolproof, but at least we are able to grow as the population grows. We are able to continue growing even during COVID, because at the end of the day, you have to eat and pretty much have to clean and you have to continue, for example, building. And this is really how we have survived, not only COVID, but also this current environment.
Right. And speaking of building, I mean, there's so many innovations that are popping up from Kenya, from Ethiopia, which is also one of your markets, and just generally across the African continent. There's so many emerging technologies that are informing how things are being done. But from your perspective, where do you think that most of the promising innovations are coming from, and where are they leading us to?
First and foremost, I'm going to be biased. I think you want to look at all the different organizations setting up in Kenya, coming up with ways to serve the market. You have to say that Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, or basically Africa as a whole, you're seeing a lot of innovation. The reality today, innovation is driven by the fact that you see there's a problem or there's a challenge and you can offer a solution. And in the African continent, we're not short of challenges. The question is, what types of solutions can you come up with and scale it to really create that impact? So, and this is what really makes Africa, number one, as a landscape, quite exciting for us, because we believe there's room to innovate at a cost and being cost competitive. But more importantly, really solving the everyday to-day challenges. And I'm glad to say you see most of our products or some of the innovations that we've had is solving some of these challenges.
Great. The question is, what type of solutions can you come up with and scale? Are there particular innovations or solutions that are more marketable at the moment compared to others? Because it appears that even the competition in the tech space, in the innovation space, and science space as well, is more about which technology is going to be easily acceptable to the masses. And then that's the one that sells the most. But where do you think all of this, especially looking at it from the African perspective, what technologies are most driving the interest of the masses?
Yeah. Allow me to be a bit biased and speak around the chemical
Again,
industry, because this is the space I understand. This is
yes,
the space we live and breathe. There is a huge opportunity, and there's been a lot of innovation in the industrial chemical space, where we have enabled brand owners to put better products on the shelf. And when I mean better products, allow me to give an example. It was not long ago that you'd go into the shelves and you'd find a really huge difference between imported products and local products. But if you observe today, if you look at and I'm talking about the shelf space where you see a lot of the packaged goods, be it the cereals, be it your detergent, be it anything that you'd find in the shelf that's packaged. So today you're seeing that gap close, where the local companies are really competing effectively also with the international brands. And this is a good example where we have enabled packaging solutions in the local markets to be able to compete with the international, not only brands, but also imported products. So to me, this has been an exciting space, a space that we have grown quite significantly. Another innovation I'd like to speak about is we all know what's happening today when the rains have not been here with us for 2 years. So as a company, we observed that there is this gap in the market, and our packaging business, together with one of our partners, Packaging Industries Limited. And for those who don't know Packaging Industries Limited, and I hope we are all of that age, you remember those old back in the day when there were paper bags, namely green and yellow, that had calendars on them? They used to be carrier
yes,
bags. That was the company that developed that plastic bag, and their signature was putting calendars on it. And today they have transformed their business, and they make silage bags that are reusable and are really geared to the small scale holder farmer, who's basically having 1 cow, 2 cows to 3 cows. And so these are some of the exciting innovations that we see and we are part of. And allow me just to mention one more innovation that I'm
yeah.
very proud of, is that if you look at your cleaning products, the cleaning products over time have improved. And I hope we are all consumers and we are all going to the supermarkets and trying to buy products. You have to say that now most brands are really putting out reasonably good quality products. And we have been part of that journey in one way or another
Mhm.
on the back end.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned the paper bags that had calendars on them at the back. I'm sure many of us here must have either in some way had a relative or a family member who bought those bags. And especially, like you mentioned, people in the agricultural sector as well and industry generally had to make sure they had those. But it's interesting that you mentioned the transition that has happened along the way and over the years, and it's interesting to see that we are also being more and more receptive towards these changes. What would you say have been some of the visible successes since you got into the market in 2010?
Wow. This is a good one because we are also very proud of it. Um, as I said, we are in different sectors. Allow me to speak about paints and coating. It was very common that when houses were painted, it needed 3 days before you could move in, because if you moved in, there was such a heavy odor and you had to leave the house open for days for that odor to dissipate. And it was very simple, because a lot of times that those paints were what we call solvent-based paints. And therefore the solvent is just basically a chemical that evaporates at almost room temperature. Today, most paints and coatings that you buy are water-based. So meaning that they are much healthier, they are safer for the environment and also for you, the user. And that's been one of the biggest technologies that we have enabled in this market. And I'm glad to say you have seen brands put out water-based paints that actually perform even better than the solvent-based paint. So that's one of the biggest things that we have enabled. I think the other thing I would speak to is that if you look at our industrialists in Kenya, in particular, even in East Africa, one of the things that we tend to notice that they have invested in very good quality equipment over time, and not just from 2010, but it's just been the nature of the market. And what we have done is that to ensure that these investments that they have made, then they're able to produce products and goods that are similar to what you'd find in other markets. And this has been one of the biggest things that we have observed over time. The other thing is to also raise awareness around what we call the Dow Corporate Impact Fund, that we have new technologies and we have been able to show them to the market through that fund. If you go to Kasarani, to the Little Sisters of St. Francis, they have a water kiosk. If you go there, you will see that they vend water that is fluoride free, because this is a technology that we enabled to introduce into the market, and now is quite accessible to many people, and therefore consuming water that has no fluoride. As we all know, fluoride is a big challenge for your body. It browns the teeth and actually weakens the bones. So that's a few of the examples that I would like to give in terms of the journey that we have walked through. But hopefully it resonates with the people on the call space.
I'm sure it does. And it's interesting that you mentioned the aspect of making it more healthier for people to consume, or ensuring the products that you are behind are safe and good for people's well-being. I think that's absolutely critical. In fact, the other day I was reading about the top 10 countries that produce the highest plastic waste. And it was measured, I think, in metric tons. And Kenya, guess what, was number 5 among the top 10 countries that produce the highest total plastic waste. They put the number, I think, at about 1.2, close to 1.3 million metric tons of waste. So you can imagine how all the other countries, in this case, I'm sure you can take a wild guess and figure out who the top 4 countries are. There was Egypt, there was, I think, was it Algeria or Tunisia? Algeria in second place, Nigeria in third place. And then South Africa as well came in 4th place, and then Kenya in the 5th place. But in terms of plastic waste, I think that there's so much that needs to change. And this challenge of plastic waste is definitely one that when you come to many parts of Africa's cities, you're going to see a visible challenge with plastic waste. And I'm just curious to know how you, as Dow, are trying to address this, because I mean, we're now moving into a world where we're all talking about sustainable living, sustainable cities, and making sure that people understand the value in recycling stuff. But this is a challenge we all face. And probably by 2050, we might not have figured it all out entirely, but we hope that we will. How do you think we can address some of these challenges?
I wish I had a simple answer, but I'll tell you what we are doing as an organization. And before I get to that, I make a comment. Africa in general is consuming at least maximally 1/6, a sixth of what developed nations consume when it comes to plastics. And the more we industrialize, the more people have more money to spend, the more everything gets packaged, the more the higher use of plastics, the more the challenge of plastics will continue to compound. So the reality is that when I look at the countries that you named, Egypt all the way to Kenya, our plastic consumption is still much, much lower compared to other developed nations. And here, when I mean developed nations, I'm looking at the Northern Hemisphere, be it Europe, North America, Asia as well. So to your point, today, plastics is a challenge when it's in the environment. I'm sure as we all drive around and when it rains, the drainage is blocked and therefore you cannot get home on time. I mean, you have something negative to say about plastics, being that it's the most visible material today that people attribute and see in the environment. So, but let's take a step back. Is the plastics bad, or it's the way we dispose of it? So the reality is that plastics makes a big difference in the way we are able to live our lives. Today, when you go to the supermarket, you're able to buy your vegetables, pack them, and go home. So there's a space for plastics, and it today remains the best alternative to other materials when it comes to packaging because of how practical it is. But when it goes into the environment, when we dispose of it poorly, is when it becomes a big challenge. So, what's our play as a company? Number one, plastics is the majority of Dow Chemical company. I think today it's contributing out of that 55 billion that we were speaking about 50% is generated from our polyethylene business, which is essentially plastics. So, we as being producers of plastics, we need to have a social license to operate. And that social license to operate comes from the fact that we want to create awareness of how you can add value to post-consumer plastics. That means the moment you went and bought whatever you bought from the supermarket that was packed in plastics, where can that plastics be reused, recycled, and make it back into some form of an economy? As a company, we have a plastics plan, and it's composed of two major approaches. One is stop the waste or stop the leakage into the environment. And to do this, you must make sure that the public is aware on how to best plastics. Number two, you must give plastics a value, and we believe plastics has a value. So today, when you see people consume your sodas and you see waste pickers collecting the plastics, is because they see a value that they can sell that plastics to someone else, and that person can then create or recycle it and create a different product. Number two is close the loop. Closing the loop essentially is where we as companies, we start looking at recycling and selling recycled products in the future. And there's a commitment done by the company by 2035. We aim to have a majority of our products sold into packaging applications containing recycled content, and most importantly is that they should be reusable. So that's our play around plastics and how we look at creating an impact around and creating an economy around plastics.
All right. Creating a circular economy around plastics and closing the loop. I like that you mentioned that the products, once they get to the end of their lives, then you can't say you're going to recycle them any further. Which brings me to the point around waste management. How then, with these innovations, do you think that we need to go about disposing of or waste management? Because I think there is where the challenge is, especially. And I don't know what innovations are currently available because we've got all kinds of waste in the market. Plastics is just one of them. And it's just one frame of the rest of the pool of waste, and management is that big challenge. Where do you think those solutions come from?
Joy, if I get you correct, you're asking is really how do we develop a circular economy around plastics? Really,
Exactly.
I think this is really what you're addressing. I have to say is there is no simple solutions. Nobody can work alone to create a circular economy. And one of the things that we are doing as an organization, or even as an industry, forget as an organization, the whole packaging sector. Because as I said, I have a product, I sell it to someone else who converts it for a brand owner, and the brand owner puts products on the shelf. And to create a circular economy, number one is a collaborative approach. Everybody in the value chain needs to come together. Who's in this value chain? There's people like myself who are manufacturers of raw materials or the plastics. We have people who take our products, convert them into the buckets, paper bags, pouches, milk pouches, whatever packaging they convert it into. We have someone who collects the waste. So basically, the person who comes to pick up your waste. There's the recycler, and there's also the person who collects the waste. So for this discussion to be successful, everybody has to be in the room. And therefore, one of the things we have done, and really what companies are looking to do, is that we have a responsibility to mobilize funds and create initiatives to support countries like Kenya to tackle these challenges. So one of the things we did is that we invested in a recycler, because you have to go to that person who is able to have a collection system. And once that plastic is collected, he recycles it, adds value to it, and then it finds its way back into other products or even exported. And therefore, everybody in the value chain has played their part. One, you stop the leakage, you take out the plastic from the environment. Two, people are able to make a living out of this activity. And thirdly, is that that's where the innovation comes in. Today, most of the recycling that's taking place, it's still very at its infancy. So there's a whole roadmap to really develop it and ensure that the product that comes out of recyclers is of high quality and therefore can be used for higher applications. And when that happens, even the waste picker or even anybody along the value chain gets put money back in their pockets.
All right. I like that you said nobody can work alone to create a circular economy. It's got to take a collaborative approach. And I think that's where now we need to work towards creating a sustainable agenda. And I really don't know what it would take because we just had COP27 just last month. And I think one of the issues that people were struggling with was that Coca-Cola, which is one of the biggest plastic producers, was one of the sponsors around the COP27. And so there was a lot of talk around sustainability and producing plastics and then having a circular economy plug into that. It was a really big issue, especially among the activists themselves. And I really don't want to get into it because it's going to be a whole other conversation altogether. But I'm thinking that we definitely need partnerships and collaborations. And you've mentioned some of them. But we're seeing that climate change as well is one of the biggest threats to sustainability. And I want to pick your brain on how do we merge the circular economy with sustainability and well-being and making sure that even in the corporate world, in the business world, all of these factors are not left behind.
Yeah, it's easy for people to be activists, but I would like to refer you to one of my favorite readings. It's called Man in the Arena. When you get a chance, read it. It says it's easy to criticize, but truly, unless you are in it, then you know what it takes. The reality is that you're right. Sustainability today is a topic that you cannot stay away. We are a publicly traded company. And in Wall Street, one of the big questions everybody asks is that they need to have an understanding of what's your sustainability goal and your targets. And therefore, today, the share price of most publicly traded companies have a component that reflects their ambition around sustainability. So as a company, we have an ambition around sustainability. And for us, it centers around two things, people and planet. So as I said, for the planet, is essentially is really stopping the leakage of plastics to the environment. The other one is safer materials, ensuring that the materials that we put out there in terms of the raw materials or chemicals actually have a safe profile. And today, the journey of sustainability is relatively new to any and all organizations. And so what that takes is that we are all stepping out of our comfort zone and looking for partnerships for people who may understand and have those strengths to really activate. As I said, for example, if I look at our investment into Mr. Green, which was its first in Africa, is really helping us get into a space where we are saying we need plastics collected and recycled. How do we come in as a raw material supplier or a material science-based company? Is how do we ensure that the recycling that's happening is putting out products, number one, that are of high quality, and number two, that have higher value addition, in the sense going to higher value applications. And if we do that, then sustainability stops being a talking point, but something practical. And the beauty, and for those who are on the call, if I look at the future is going to be around innovations around sustainability. You look at all the people who are getting a lot of funding from private equity. There is that part of how sustainable is your business, not just financially, but the impact it creates around people, around the planet.
Right. Around people and around the planet. I keep seeing all these campaigns going on around how people need to understand the different facets of sustainability, the sustainability reporting. And I think maybe our corporate world has tried to adopt all of those. And some of our business owners and businesses generally around East Africa have tried to have that sustainability reporting going on. And with these campaigns, I know that you've had one of the projects called Mr. Green. That partnership, how did it come about? Because I guess for somebody who would really want to understand what sustainability is all about, what well being or what the circular economy is all about, would really want to know from this campaign how you are able to get through with it and make people understand what this is all about.
Yeah, our partnership with Mr. Green about in an interesting way, but it goes back to those ambitions I spoke about around our sustainability goal. If I look at, and I'm addressing plastics in this case, really to talk about sustainability around plastics, you're looking at three elements. You're looking at reducing the amount of plastics that you're using today. We're talking about recycling, and we're talking about reuse. Now, reducing is where we are very good at, because today, that's why we are seeing a lot of the plastics that you're using today. Number one, everybody complains it feels flimsy. But if you look at it from a functionality perspective, it's doing the work. So that's what we call down gauging, essentially doing more with less. When we talk about the concept of reuse, I think the concept of reuse from an African perspective is as old as time, because today we repurpose. You use your jerry can after whatever you empty the primary content that was there. You find another use for that jerry can. So reuse around plastics is already happening. But recycling is where we had the big question and we saw the biggest opportunity. And that's where our partnership with Mr. Green really addresses. Now, Mr. Green has a very interesting comparative advantage. One, he has streamlined and created a really huge network of collection when it comes to plastic. Number two, he also has invested in one of the latest technologies around creating recycled plastic. So he's able to collect the plastic, clean it, pelletize it, and therefore it finds its use again into different products. But I think also what's interesting about Mr. Green is that idea of incentivizing waste pickers, offering a higher stable income by paying higher prices for his plastics. When you go to the supermarket and you're buying your coffee pack, you always find a label in most of the coffee saying this is a fair trade coffee. So the fair trade concept is very simple. It's basically shared value across the chain. If the plastic fetches a higher market at the very end when it's recycled, then that value should trickle down to the collection system and therefore to the waste picker. And I think that is something that we found that was creating an impact. Remember, one of the ambitions for us as a company is, one, to be innovative, customer centric, and the other one is to also have an impact in the economies that we operate in. And that's extremely important. And this is an example of how you can be impactful, not just from science, but also from the partnerships that you make. And as I had alluded earlier, is that one of the responsibilities we have as organizations is really ensuring that we have a social license to continue operating, especially being the fact that we are plastic producers.
Okay. And then there was the other one, I think, what was it called? Mama Silage? Was it?
Yes, yes, yes.
You know, talk to us about that. I actually found that one quite interesting because I thought that it had this very unique identity to it. And it probably was speaking to a particular group of people, but let's hear it from you.
Yeah, again, this is innovation at work, where again speaks to the true spirit of innovation, where you see a problem, you work across the value chain to solve that problem. As I said, Mama Silage is first of all a global award-winning innovation recognized by the Packaging Innovation Awards. And number two, it's also created a lot of impact across this country and across the region. Now, what is it? Today, Mama Silage is a bag, and this bag is a tough bag, for lack of better words. It's a bag that can farmers take. They chop up their maize together with the cob, the maize silage. They pack it in this bag tight, and therefore they are able to store the silage for a lot longer, especially when the maize is out of season. And for now, we have even farmers who prepared silage about 6, 7 months ago, and they're still feeding out of that. Now, if I look at what made mama silage interesting and where the innovation comes in, one, it used less plastic. The bag itself is recyclable and it's reusable. In most cases, silage made in bags, you'd only use the bag once or twice. You can use this bag up to 7 or 8 times. So the concept again of reuse is really huge. Reuse, recycle, designing for recyclability, and obviously down gauging, which is doing more with less plastic.
Doing more with less plastic. I'm curious to also pick your brain on the fact that, and I know you said that you're in Kenya and in Ethiopia as well. Do you find that the behavior in Kenya is different from Ethiopia? Because I know people have previously said the Kenyan market is a peculiar market, but do you find the same behavior changes in the other countries where you've got presence?
Every country has its own peculiarities, and you have
Yeah.
to appreciate those nuances whenever you go into a new market. I will take a very simple example. How much fresh milk do you think is consumed in Ethiopia vis-a-vis Kenya? Here,
Mm,
every person consuming tea is drinking their tea and coffee with milk. Is that
yeah.
correct? Or at
Yes,
least
that's
the
true.
majority. If you go to Ethiopia, this is not the case. They're a coffee drinking nation, but a lot of their
Mhm.
coffee is black coffee. Yeah? That's a very simple example that I have given. And obviously, their way of life. So the reality is that each market, and one of the things that we do whenever we go into a market, you need to ask more questions than give answers to. Keep asking the questions and treat each market, understand the needs of that market to be able to serve those markets better. So in Ethiopia and Kenya, neighbors, but again, we have our nuances, and this is what really makes what we do quite special, is because if you ask the right questions and you understand where the true opportunity lies, and how you can tap into that market. But yeah, but to your point, I think you should treat every country differently, and forget even country, even counties. The consumption
Yes.
behavior is very different. So this is a reality we need to navigate and also appreciate that.
Do you find that it is a lot easier to explain the sustainability agenda today than it was maybe 5 years ago? Because it only feels that up until the pandemic, looks like the pandemic really opened up people's minds and their eyes as well to really looking inward, outward, and vice versa to what the realities of the world really are. But do you think it's now easier to explain sustainability to people or to businesses than before?
I'll answer this question in two ways. One is that uh, from a corporate setting, as I've said, every organization has sustainability goals. And it is the role of the leader to ensure that everybody in your organization understands what the sustainability goals are and how they contribute to that. And therefore, it's much easier when year on year, over the many years, when you keep talking about the fact that we want to do good. We're not just a profit making organization, but we need to protect the environment, we need to protect the planet. So it becomes that in everything that you do, you're always having that at the back of your mind. And it actually forms the foundation of really building a sustainable business, in the sense that it's not just about profits, but also about the impact and the footprint that you leave behind. So from a corporate setting, very clear. And I think it's much easier when you have these discussions. But I look at it from the lessons of COVID. The lessons of COVID were essentially, are we consuming more than we ever needed? Because I think it was almost a rude awakening of how can we consume responsibly? How can we be our brother's keepers? In the sense today, the number one discussion in every household is, how do we consume consciously? So this wanton consumption is, I think, decreasing at a household level, or people are a bit more aware of how to consume a lot more responsibly. But the exciting journey ahead of us when it comes to sustainability, I have a colleague of mine called Mombi, and I saw her here. If you go to schools today, kids as young as 5, 6 years of age are being taught that today plastics is valuable. So whenever they drink their water, there's the collection systems of plastics. These are aggregated and they go to recyclers. Kids will say, is plastics good for the environment? We need to plant more trees. we have also just come from 2 years of no rains and everybody spoke about drought, climate change. Is it as a result of the fact that we are consuming or we are damaging the environment? So I think we have all lived through many examples that have, even for those people who were critics and or cynics around the impact we were having on the planet, I think everybody now is becoming a believer and asking themselves what they can do.
I like that. So if I'm going to ask this as a personal question, how has being in the chemistry industry informed how you view life in general and how you are able to transform the goals of the business at Dow Chemical? You want to just tell us how all of this plugs into it? Because I can't even think about it. A time where chemistry was one of my favorite subjects.
It's a good question. Being in the chemical world is quite exciting, and it opens up you to seeing possibilities of the opportunities we have out here, including that sustainability we were talking about. I think the future entrepreneurs will be heavily invested in sustainability. So one of the things that, at least from a chemical industry, I'm in an industry that now our biggest ambition is truly to be sustainable. And that really opens up opportunities for entrepreneurship. And that's really the exciting journey we can take. Now, at the consumer level, I'm a consumer just like you. So when I go to the supermarket, I'm able to see, man, here's an opportunity that we can innovate around. Or I see a product that doesn't work effectively and reach out to those brand owners to improve it. So all in all is that without you knowing, you live and breathe chemistry every day. I think what lacks is that if you're not in this sector, you're not able to connect the dots. But as I said, we're a B2B business. So we are always in discussions with the manufacturers who put those products on the shelf. So it's quite exciting, and you just see a world of possibilities every day. And then the other thing that has happened for us and what makes it interesting is when you see innovations introduced in the market, they solve the problem, they thrive, and you're able to scale up those innovations, therefore creating the impact has also been quite fulfilling.
Wow. So to everyone who has just joined the space, we are talking about innovation, we're talking about collaborations and what the science is saying about the sustainability agenda and also around the circular economy and how that is informing business decisions around the African continent as well. And so we're going to open up the space to anybody who has questions. So if you have a question, kindly send a request and we'll be able to allow you the mic maybe for about 2 minutes. So you're able to ask any questions related to what we're talking about, which is science, innovation, and collaborations as well. And looking into what the future looks like. I don't know, where do you see our innovations heading towards? Because from a larger perspective, we are seeing people going into artificial intelligence and many other emerging technologies that are now informing decisions. And really, the adaptation of AI does come with a lot of risks as well. So, where do you see us going in terms of where the science is leading us to?
Is that addressed to me, Joy, or to the audience?
It's addressed to you and the audience as well, but I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's just a world of possibilities. So much. I'm actually going to not even call it change. It's just disruption. I think the way we consume in the future will change. The concept or what's coming in the near future, we all know this law of the National Waste Management Bill that was passed. And in one of those things that it mandates, the idea that you're going to have to sort your own waste before you release it to whoever is your garbage collector. So, but what I see is that, in short, is that we should welcome disruption in many ways. It's going to happen in the chemical industry. Today, we have plants that are being operated by less than 10 people. And typically, these were plants that were operated by hundreds and hundreds of people. So to your point, artificial intelligence, we have our logistics also heavily streamlined. But then also at the household level, be ready to see a lot of disruption, either through reuse, smart packaging with a barcode such that you can get reimbursed when you take back that packaging to the store. There's a lot of disruption that's coming our way. And it's actually even unfolding as we speak.
We are opening this up to anyone who might have questions. So please send through that request. And is someone who actually, when I mentioned that we're going to have a conversation around science, innovation, and collaboration, the question that they raised as well was a question around the young people. Do you think they are innovating for the future? Because many times we are seeing that the innovations they're coming up with are to solve instant problems, but not long-term solutions. What do you say about that, Leonard?
I think innovation is an iteration process. If you were to look at all the journey great companies have taken, you have to be willing to solve the problem today, improve on it, and as you improve, disruption comes. The electric vehicles started and they could never be scaled up. Today we are talking about semis. Tesla is putting up these huge 18-wheelers on the road. So, or any other company that's been quite, Apple as well, you saw them go through their iPods and now they're no more iPods. The point is that the young people are innovating at a really fast rate. I think what we need to do is to really support that dream, put structures in place where those innovations have the platform to be funded correctly and to be scaled up. And then obviously for us who are in business, really supporting the young people by mentoring them. So there's a huge space, and I'm so happy with what the Kenyan youth, obviously the African youth, is doing around innovation, be it in the tech world, be it in the building and construction space. You feel very hopeful that the future is bright if we keep doing this.
Great. So for those of you who would like to make comments, you can either do that in text or you can send a speaker request and we'll open up the mic just shortly. Remember to use the hashtag Mongo Spaces so that we're able to capture the comments that you're making regarding the topic today. John, I think you want to make some comment, ask some question. John, you have the mic for about 2 to 3 minutes or 4 at the most. Go ahead.
Thank you, Joy. And thank you, Leonard, for that amazing spaces. Leonard, I have a question for you. Knowing that the essence of technology and science and innovation is to contribute to the knowledge and then the utilization of that knowledge to boost the prosperity of the communities around. Are there such programs you have with your company? And you can highlight some of them.
I think it's a good question, John, and I should have pointed out. As I said, one of the things that we're very proud of is leaving a footprint in all the countries that we operate in. And to do this is that you have to be able to tap into those young minds. And we have a very strong science, technology, engineering, and math program. We have partnerships with the University of Nairobi. We have also partnered with the Mukoga Vocational Training School for some of our projects. And year on year, we have multiple projects that we are doing around science, technology, engineering, and math. We also run internships for young college graduates that who are still in university. The other thing is that, as I said, sustainability is a very collaborative space. You will find that we are funding as well as creating platforms for people to innovate, solving these challenges around plastics. As I said, we cannot do it alone. So that's really how we engage. But yeah, being a chemical company, science, technology, and engineering and math have been very close to us. And we have partnerships with the Kenyatta University. We are also part of the YALI, which was an initiative Obama started. And we have been part of these multiple cohorts having supported in that.
All right, great. Thanks a lot. John, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, that was very clear. Thank you, Leonard.
Okay, great. So, Leonard, I want to know from you as well regarding these innovations and collaborations that you have. You've mentioned Kenyatta University as well as some other programs that you're running. In these innovation spaces among these groups of young learners and the institutions themselves, do you think that what they're innovating is in tandem with the market's needs? Because usually we tend to have a clash where what's being learned, what's being innovated and the encouragement that is going on in these institutions is far different than what the market demand is. Are you able to share research with them on what the market's needs are so they're able to plug into that with their innovations?
Yes, and it goes back to what I just earlier was indicating. For example, we find the sustainability space being an interesting area where we are seeing some very good innovations coming from young people in colleges. What do you do with post-consumer plastics? If you were to be it building blocks, be it building materials. So, and Mumbi has more details around this. We sponsored a cohort just around sustainability, and you hear very brilliant ways of how, number one, can you enhance collection of plastic? How do you create it into interesting other chemistries? So there is a lot happening in that space, especially around sustainability and the other partnerships. For example, during COVID, this is when we truly went digital, and there was this: how do you teach chemistry, or how do you record your classes for the university lecturers to ensure that people don't, no one is left behind. And I know my colleague funded a very nice studio where you can, with the University of Nairobi, where that really helped enhance the quality of the podcast or the classes that the professors were teaching. So that's been our play in that. But I would really encourage the young people to look at the trends of the future. The trends of the future are very clear. One, this concept of sustainability, where you're trying to ensure that it's not business as usual. It's not just about profits, but also protecting the environment and even yourself as a consumer. I see a huge space to innovate around that. Obviously, there's the digital space, there's the tech space. So that would be my answer. I'm not sure whether I've answered the question.
It's there for sure. And you talk about the utilization of knowledge. And I think that's probably one of the ways to go about it, because I know that I've spoken to people who are in the telco industry who also say they're having a challenge looking at what the graduates are doing, or in this case, while they're undergraduates, what they're doing, what they're innovating vis-a-vis what the market demand is. And that has led to a lot of businesses, not just the telcos, a lot of businesses going directly to partner with these learning institutions to tailor make courses that are relevant to the market demand. And that, I think, is where we are having innovation gaps, and which has informed the collaborations between businesses and these learning institutions, which is, I think, a fantastic way to go about innovation and collaboration as well. Eric, you have some questions?
Thanks, Joy. I just wanted to ask a question about the relationship between Dow Chemical and DuPont. I know at some point some of the companies split into three separate companies, very huge and highly complex transaction. I wanted to understand the thinking that went into splitting this company into three separate companies and how that has gone on. I know they have a very rich history, all of them. So just wanted to understand that.
It's a good question. I can't pretend to have the complete answer. I'm quite far from the C-suite. But I'll give you a history of how this company has navigated the water. There was always Dow Chemical Company. There was always DuPont Numerous, both are an American company. So Dow and DuPont are American. They both had agrosciences. The agrosciences business is basically the businesses that does crop nutrition. So when you talk about nutrition and chemical crop protection. Now, if I remember correctly, it was 2018. Both companies came together, and it was very simple what drove these two companies coming together. Over time, over the 100 years the company has existed, they had bought companies and bolting onto their operations. So if you look at Dow, we were in the agrosciences space, and that was as a result of an acquisition. We were in the what we call the water space. That was as a result of an acquisition. We were in the epoxy space. So it was a really huge, what we call a conglomerate. Basically, you have so many businesses, and it's been as a result of acquisitions. Now, you get to a certain of business, and then you realize you're not the right owner of the acquisitions you've made. Now, what do? This is really what happened with Dow. So Dow and DuPont came together, formed Dow DuPont in 2018. But the goal was very simple, that the businesses each of these organizations would retain should have very huge synergies, and basically those companies should be the right owners of those businesses. And therefore, as a result, DuPont and Dow lost the agrosciences businesses. The agroscience business from DuPont and Dow merged together and therefore formed a new company called Corteva. Dow kept the packaging, infrastructure, and consumer care business lines, and DuPont took on what we call the specialty chemistries. And today what you find is basically narrower companies, but are able to go deeper into their chemistries and are able to innovate faster. Because when your businesses are not all of the same nature, what will happen, you'll innovate in the short term for the business that's producing cash in the short term. But the business that will be here in the long term, or a smaller business that has a future that needs a lot more investment to scale, that's normally left behind. And that's been the history of this merger, where the two companies came together, formed the biggest chemical company, and then we demerged. Now, what are some key lessons out of this? And really, to your question, one, all these sectors that we are in have what we call cycles. So you have the up cycle and you have the down cycle. And for example, now with all that's happening with inflation, global challenges of supply, energy crisis, you're going to hit a down cycle. But it's what you do when you're in your down cycle that ensures your survival in the long run. So what you find, one, is a very strict cash management process within these organizations. Two, very clear purpose of why you exist. Okay, you need to be very clear on why you exist. And thirdly, you must have a very clear focus on people. So this has been the three things that I have seen that has really helped these organizations really weather the good times and the bad times. And the bad times in quote, but just difficult times that you need to navigate. I hope that answers the question. Huh?
Good evening, everyone. As a colleague of Leonard, and he's mentioned and articulated very well what Dow is doing in especially the space of sustainability. And I want to take you a little bit back to, mention a little bit about the power of the youth. And the youth of Africa are really special because they have the ability to drive this agenda forward. And I think we are depending on them a lot. I want to just mention two things. We, as a company, of course, we are enabling production, which is manufacturing. And from a production point, we need to enable our youth to start producing locally. Are they producing and selling to these markets? And hence, when we talk about the STEM and the power of science, and why we go to the universities is to make sure that the young students are understanding that we are empowering them to go out and produce products that they can then enable communities progress. Hence our collaborations with the TVETs. And the TVETs, we just don't go to just provide equipment, but we also enhance their curriculums and really expose them to the new technologies that can allow them not only to make application, to know how to put a tile or how to make a wall with stones, but how to actually make a tile, produce it, make cravats, and really put it. But how can you actually do that in a more sustainable way? How can you apply sustainable solutions to do that? And you have really two great programs, even beyond our collaborations with universities and institutions. We have, of course, the Young Africa Leaders Initiative, as Len had mentioned, and we use what we call design challenge. We bring the challenges of today, sustainability challenges, we place them on the table, and together with the youth, we come up with a solution. So they go out and find the solutions, and the best solutions, we fund them so that they can go out and be actioned in the communities. And this is how we can really drive that sustainability agenda. This year, we also implemented a big Pan-African action with the youth. Again, the Youth Week of Service, which is just bringing the youth of Africa around. So conversation about the SDGs and driving them to bring the voice onto the table and take them to action. And out of those engagements, we're able to see very, very creative and innovative projects that are coming out of the youth of Africa. and we are giving them grants to go and progress those projects. So we are holding the youth of Africa's hands, and I think it's an area that we really need to put focus on, because again, as we help them, we're helping our economies grow, and we're allowing them to really produce locally. We want them to be manufacturers. They can manufacture and become big producers of the solutions that we all need in Africa. So I wanted to make that comment because it really links back to why really we are supporting this segment of the population.
Great.
Thanks.
That's amazing. And just to add to what Mumbi has said, I think it's important to also highlight that while it's amazing that organizations and companies and businesses and multilateral organizations as well work with these learning institutions, it's also key and critical to ensure that the technologies that are being used in these institutions of learning resonate with the new technologies in the market. Because one of the issues I think that one of the funders of an agri-tech project from the United States into Kenya mentioned was that students, for instance, in universities who are pursuing engineering courses are studying using technologies of the 1970s and then have to apply newer technologies of the 21st century when they get into the job market. So you can imagine learning to drive a tractor that was manufactured in, I think, the 60s or something. And it's the only one that's available for their tutorials. And then now he gets into the market and the tractor is a very different tractor altogether. So having to sync those two, that the technologies that are being taught in the unis are just about what the market resonates with and is looking into exploring these newer technologies is very important. Thanks a lot for highlighting that. If you have any questions, kindly send the request, put through a request, and Eric would give you the mic so you can make a comment. And as we get through that, Leonard, I want to hear from you as well. Looking into the future, where is Dow Chemicals focusing?
The future for us is one is really that focus on sustainable growth, especially within the African context. And it goes back to what Mombi is saying. If you look at Africa and why people believe it's the last frontier is because you have the youth, you have so many people. I don't remember the percentages of how many percentage are below 25. And they're all living in a period that is changing so fast. There's constant change, disruption, and the world feels the size of a bubble gum in the sense that there's no innovation that's being released elsewhere in the world that you can't experience either through social media, through the web, or through any other way. For that, we believe, for example, we are in the right industry because 96% of the world's manufacturing goods are enabled by plastics. So our job is to make sure that are we in the right markets? Are we creating the impact and innovating for the needs of those markets? That's our short, mid, and long-term goal. That's sustainable growth. Number two comes the idea of impact. Are we also touching lives in creating or disrupting and create that change that we want to see? As we said, there's no reason that we cannot leapfrog the journey that Europe or the US took to get to where they are. And that's really a challenge to all the young minds in the room. I think finally, and it's a really big opportunity for us, is this idea of sustainability. And sustainability still remains one of the biggest opportunities that anyone who's an engineer and is getting into this space, you will see a lot of disruption. Electric vehicles, the mobile space, anything digital, I think will be quite an exciting space. So for us, we believe for sustainability to become a reality, we need to pull all those elements together, be it of the fintech, the digitalization, just to accelerate that journey of sustainability. So this is what I can say, the main focus for us, sustainable growth, obviously to create that impact. And finally, in everything we do, we embed sustainability. And then finally, people. Remember, I don't know who asked that question, is that how do you survive the good and the bad times to continue existing in business? At the end of all, you're just as good as your people are. And for us, this is a key part of our journey. We need to ensure that we continue to partner with the right institutions, get the best of the minds into the organization to continue creating that momentum for us.
Great. I like that. And this is probably my final question to both yourself and Mumbi as well. We look at the African continent, and you mentioned that you're looking at it from the African context. If you look at the African population right now, people keep talking about this demographic dividend and whatnot. But I tend to think that this demographic dividend we currently have, if it's not well managed and being channeled into being more innovative, being more collaborative, we are likely to miss out on something. If you look at the rest of the world or the other continents, we have like aging populations. Median age in Africa is about 18, 19. But if you look at the other continents, you have people, populations whose median age is maybe 28 or 37 for some countries. But these countries where the median age is much, much higher are countries that are already industrialized. If you look at the African continent, we are hardly industrialized. And that means that there's going to come a time when the resources and manpower and human capital of the African continent is going to be needed at a much more global level than it is right now. And while we were bypassed by the whole industrial revolution, we have the advantage of the Internet of Things and being able to innovate, to develop technologies and tap into these emerging technologies that can then now merge and bridge the gap that the entire globe is facing. The key question is, are we ready to plug into this global pool of opportunity that is likely to show up maybe in the next 10 to 15 years? Are we really there? Are we in the right direction? Because you're into the science, innovation, and collaborative space. Are you seeing these technologies and our populations working to getting to that global scale and feeding into the current gaps that we have in the different parts of the world?
Joy, the reality is this: for the youth dividend to pay, the knowledge gap must be reduced. That's number one. We need to make sure that every man, woman, whose youth really needs to be literate and have achieved some form of training. It could be formal or informal. But that's number one. You need to bridge that knowledge gap. And then when that knowledge gap is bridged, the first thing that you'll quickly realize is that then you become a global citizen. And today, globalization is basically, the world is the next frontier. It's not just Africa that's a frontier. It's basically the world. And for that reason, if you are basically having the skills, the right attitude, you can then plug and play into any other society. You have to give it to Africans. I think we're the most adventurous people globally. Just by nature, you'll find an African in each and every corner of this world. Into even countries that where English is maybe the fourth or the fifth language, but we find a way to thrive. So for me, the reality is that with the access to digital tools and the web, you basically close that knowledge gap, but it needs to be very intentional from all fronts. And then the rest is that wherever there's that demand supply of labor, then you plug in. But the reality is that the big challenge we have today is that a majority of the youth do not have a tangible skill and actually do not have knowledge divide is just too huge.
The knowledge divide is too huge. And I guess with that said, we can sort of see where science, innovation, and collaboration stands. But I think there's immense room for growth, and that growth needs to be tapped into. And thankfully, we've got very innovative, very smart brains behind the emerging technologies. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen over the next few years. And so it's been great having you, Leonard, speak to us about innovations, about science, about collaborations around sustainability, because really, what are we doing if we're not talking about sustainability across Africa and around the world? Let's move on to Mombi.
I really truly enjoyed the conversation today, but I think as Africa, the biggest challenge for us as a closing is that we must come together if we have to really lift something out of what is coming next. When we talk about the future can only be advanced. It's advancing really fast. So for us is that we need to really see the future. We should be able to see ahead as much as possible. And I can see some great things that are coming. We can see the Africa Continental Free Trade area that is being developed, meaning that our markets are being opened. We have big opportunities ahead. We have got the youth ahead of us. We have got the technologies that are being brought by companies such as Dow. We have the conversations of sustainability. We can already go into it very fast. We have no excuse not to be successful. We can only just really put the barriers for ourselves, not to progress. We should challenge our political systems so that we are able to really break the barriers that we have across Africa, so that people, goods, services can really move across Africa, and we're able to enable these markets thrive. And perhaps companies such as ourselves will be able to enable these markets progress and advance the manufacturing, and in there also advance the conversation around sustainability. So well done, and thank you for hosting us. Leonard.
Thanks, Mumbi. You wrapped it up quite well. I think for me, the takeaway is this. Behind these huge brands that you see, or big names, or example, organizations like ourselves, is actual, tangible successes or innovations. So I'd like to leave you with these two things. One, when you have your spare time, you can always type in mama silage. Mama is the normal mama, and silage. I think look up and see what that is all about. Two, we have Mavuno Bora, basically Mavuno harvest, and Bora, very simple. Three, when you get a chance, look up Mr. Green, see what they're doing, and then take it from the context. Could this be the next big thing? Could recycling be the next big thing? And then four, for me, what's really critical is that we have the youth and we need to give direction. And this direction comes from optimism, in the sense that the future can only be brighter, but we are the ones who are going to be that change that we want to see. And it's quite exciting, as I've said, landscape, and I see the amount of capital, foreign direct investments coming to the different innovations in this market. You must be proud of what we are achieving as a market, and extremely happy that to have done this. This is the first time I'm participating in a Twitter space, and thanks to Joy, Tessie, and Mango Capital for making it happen. And visit our website for those who are keen on chemistry, see what else we do. Yeah, chemistry is exciting. Thanks, and good evening to
Chemistry is exciting. Oh my word. I don't even know. I remember the periodic tables from high school, and I'm like, you know what? Why did this subject have to be this complicated? It's been an amazing conversation, I must say. And I mean, from just getting to know Leonard from a personal perspective to now getting to know what really Dow Chemical is all about, and the plans that you have around East Africa and the continent as well, and the presence that you have in 31 countries, 35,700 employees. I think that's amazing that the work you're doing is focused on the sustainability agenda, reducing, recycling, reuse, and the aspect of having to look at it from that perspective and looking into the future and making sure that everybody is just being a part of it is what has really been the key takeaway for me. Sustainability today is something you can't talk about without mentioning collaborative approaches. And I think for me, there's so much that I could take away from this. And I wish you all the best. Thank you for all the advice, and also just allowing us into the space to understand what Dow Chemical is on about. Now, for those of us who are unaware of Mongo Spaces, These spaces happen on a weekly basis, and you can take part in them and follow conversations as well. If you look through the hashtag Mwango Spaces, you'll be able to follow through all the conversations that Mwango Capital has been having on Twitter as well. And you can subscribe to the newsletter, the Mwango newsletter, and be able to catch up with all of the information that you need to know about in terms of company financials as well as generally business news. You'll be able to get educated on retail investors and, of course, the rigorous research that they carry out and the high quality productions as well that they do. So be sure to also find out more information from them. You can follow Mwango Capital here on Twitter, but you can also make sure you listen in to the podcasts that are released from time to time and basically find out more about Mwango Capital. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining in. Please share this conversation with everybody in your network and follow Mwango Capital. My name is Joy. I am a media personality and a strategic communicator. Thank you all for listening. Have a great weekend and happy holidays.